Imagine a country that spends $4 million every single time it fires one missile to protect its skies. Now, picture the enemy just keeps sending $1,000 drones, one after another, every single night. No signs of stopping. Who runs out first? The side with the expensive missiles or the side with the cheap, endless drones? That question is not hypothetical. It is happening right now in two wars on two completely different continents simultaneously. And here's the wild part. This is not the first time cheap weapons have terrified expensive armies in history. Today we connect a 2026 war in the Persian Gulf, a trench in Ukraine, and a medieval battlefield in 1302. Before we dive in, seriously, think for a second. What would you do if you were the expensive side? The pattern is always the same. Cheap, repeatable force against costly, irreplaceable power. Let's go. March 1, 2026. The US and Israel launched coordinated strikes on Iran. Within hours, Iran's supreme leader was dead. Iran fired back immediately. Hundreds of missiles and over 1,000 drones aimed straight at Gulf states allied with Washington. Official public numbers. UAE intercepted 1,140 drones. Bahrain downed 76. Kuwait stopped 308. Qatar reported at least 63 intercepts. Think about that scale for a moment. Over 1,000 drones launched in just days, not one or two. 1,000. Most were shot down, but here is the real thing. Iran did not need them all to land. That was the whole point. Just 2 drones fell near Dubai International Airport. Flights were disrupted, insurance premiums spiked, oil prices climbed. Mission accomplished. That is not a military victory. That is an economic nerve attack. Poke the system enough times and it flinches hard. Iran reportedly had the capacity to produce around 10,000 drones per month. Missiles eventually run out. Drones just keep coming. Here's a question for you. If most of your weapons get shot down, does that mean your attack actually failed? Not if the enemy burned $4 million shooting each one down. That math was exactly what Iran was counting on. Iran's strategy was never about landing every hit. It was about forcing the other side to keep spending. Indefinitely. A senior Iranian official declared, "We can continue the war as long as we want." The drones were the proof. Now let us go to Ukraine. 4 years into Russia's full-scale invasion, and this is where the drone revolution became undeniable. The front line stretches 1,200 kilometers. Over it, every single day, thousands of drones filled the sky constantly. In 2022, drones caused less than 10% of all battlefield casualties. By 2025, that number climbed to as much as 80%. 80%! Let that sit for a moment. The weapon doing most of the killing costs only a few $100s. Tank Commander Valentin Bodanov used to lead armored charges across open terrain. Now his tanks hide under camouflage netting most days. Open fields are not for charging anymore. Open fields are kill zones. Drones see everything and can reach almost anything. Medical evacuation used to follow the golden hour rule. Get the wounded out in 60 minutes or survival odds drop sharply. Now evacuation sometimes takes days. Any moving vehicle is a drone target. The drone circles, it watches, it waits. Think about this honestly. You cannot move to help your wounded teammate. How does that change everything about war? Russia's Shahed drones, originally designed in Iran, now mass-produced inside Russia, cost between $20,000 and $50,000 each. By early 2025, Russia was launching over 1,000 Shaheeds per week. The goal is not precision, it is saturation. CSIS analysts labeled it attrition logic. Keep the pressure going, force the defender to spend more than you do, every time. Russia lost over 75% of its drones in some attacks, and it's still considered that a strategic win on costs. Every cheap Shahed shot down by an expensive Western interceptor missile was, in a sense, a quiet victory for Moscow. So let us talk about the numbers. This is where the story gets really interesting, and honestly a bit uncomfortable. Ukraine's interceptor drones, the ones built to hunt down enemy drones mid-flight, cost around $1,000 each. The PC-3 Patriot missile, America's gold standard air defense, cost approximately $4 million per single shot fired. $1,000 versus $4 million. That is a 4,000 to 1 cost gap. You can feel that ratio in your gut. By February 2026, interceptor drones around Kyiv were responsible for 70% of all drone kills recorded near the city. Ukrainian manufacturer Skyfall reports its P-1 Sun interceptor has downed over 1,500 Shaheds since entering service just 4 months ago. Skyfall can build up to 50,000 interceptors monthly. They are already fielding export inquiries from Gulf nations watching Iran's drone campaign. Pause right here. Do you think the future of air defense is the multi-million-dollar missile or the $1,000 drone? The U.S. Defense Innovation Unit testified that Ukraine was producing and consuming more than 4,000 drones every single day in combat. 4,000 drones per day. That is no longer a weapon of choice. That is the basic unit of modern warfare now. This war is no longer just about territory. It is about who can sustain the production line the longest without breaking. The idea that wars are decided not by the strongest weapon, but by the most sustainable one. That is not new at all. Let us go way back to the year 1302, a muddy, waterlogged field just outside the town of Kortrijk in Flanders, Belgium. France had the finest cavalry in all of Europe. Full-plate armor, war horses, lances, the most expensive military force money could buy, opposing them. Flemish guild workers, weavers, craftsmen, ordinary commoners, armed with pikes, halberds, and crossbows. No noble titles whatsoever. The French cavalry charged. Then something went terribly wrong. The ground was marshy, crisscrossed with ditches and streams. The horses stumbled. The Flemish infantry held their formation. In a single day, over 1,000 French knights were killed. The Battle of the Golden Spurs. Britannica describes this as the beginning of the infantry revolution, the moment cheap foot soldiers began consistently beating expensive cavalry on the field. Seriously, let that sink in. Weavers and craftsmen took down the finest knights in Europe. How is that even possible? Here's how. A medieval knight was not just a brave warrior, he was an extremely expensive system. The whole package cost enormously. A knight's full gear in the mid-13th century cost roughly £32 sterling. Over 10 years of wages for a foot archer? Britannica makes it plain. Crossbows could kill the most powerful mounted warriors, yet cost far less than war horses and all that armor. And here is the key difference. Crossbows took weeks to learn. Knights needed literally years just to ride and fight simultaneously. The church actually banned the crossbow in 1139 at the Second Lateran Council, calling it a weapon hateful to God and Christians. Why ban a weapon? Because it threatened the social order directly. A common person could now kill an armored aristocrat from a distance. Sound familiar? When a $1,000 drone can disable a multi-million-dollar tank, we are having the exact same conversation 800 years later. Now let us connect the dots. Because this is not just military history, it is a pattern about how power and cost interact. The knight's power came from three things: expensive armor, trained war horses, and years of refined combat skill, all requiring immense investment. The crossbow did not just kill knights, it devalued the investment that made knights powerful. That is a completely different kind of weapon. Today's expensive military systems, aircraft carriers, Patriot batteries, F-35 fighter jets, represent the same kind of massive long-term investment. And cheap drones, FPV kamikaze UAVs, Shahed-style loitering munitions, low-cost interceptors, are beginning to complicate those massive investments seriously. Here's the real question. Does cheap always beat expensive? Or is something more complicated actually going on here? Historians note the crossbow did not win alone at Kortrijk. Terrain mattered enormously. The moats and ditches stopped the cavalry charge cold. Same in Ukraine today. Drones alone have not reshaped the war. Electronic warfare, supply chains, artillery, and human coordination all still matter. And just as knights adapted, some dismounted, others added heavier armor, the expensive side today is already adapting rapidly too. Ukraine is building laser defense systems. Electronic jammers are disrupting drone guidance signals. Anti-drone netting is going up over key supply routes everywhere. After Kortrijk, France did not abandon cavalry entirely, they just changed how they used it. After Ukraine, militaries will not abandon missiles, but they must add new layers, cheaper layers. A defense that only works with $4 million missiles is simply not sustainable long-term. So does this mean cheap drones simply win everything from now on? No. And this is the part most videos skip, the nuance. Every time a cheap weapon threatens the expensive side invents a new countermeasure. History has always followed this exact pattern. When torpedo boats threatened warships in the 1880s, the answer was the destroyer, a new vessel designed solely to hunt torpedo boats. The drone era is the same ongoing cycle. High-energy lasers, AI-driven intercept systems, directed energy weapons, all are in active development right now. Rheinmetall has successfully tested a 50-kilowatt laser that can track and neutralize incoming drones. RTX has a vehicle-mounted version already deployed. The Gulf states, having watched Iran saturate their skies, are now in active talks to purchase Ukraine's low-cost interceptor drone systems. So here's where I want you to really stop and think. Who actually wins in this endless cycle? Attacker or defender? The honest answer is nobody wins permanently. The cycle just keeps going. New cheap threat, new expensive counter, new cheap response, forever. What this shift does change is the barrier to entry. More states, more non-state actors can now threaten previously untouchable military systems. A medieval peasant could not afford a warhorse, but he could learn the crossbow in weeks. The battlefield equation changed permanently. A small nation today cannot afford an aircraft carrier, but it can build thousands of drones every single month. Same shift, different century. This is not about war becoming fair. It is about expensive dominance becoming harder to maintain. That is what the data clearly shows. That's a wrap for today. A $1,000 drone, a $4 million missile, a medieval crossbow, an armored knight. Same story, different century. What